Hey, what's up? So, I'm in my new house. I haven't shot a talking video here since I moved in. And there are, some things that I wanted to do now that I am here and have all my things and stuff. And so the one that I think, I guess in my heart, I'm a booktuber, right? And so the thing every booktuber does is a shelf tour. Well, I have a lot of shelves. But the bookshelf obviously is the one that people are the most interested in seeing. So I thought I would show you my books. Most of them are things I haven't read. So I don't hang on to that many books unless it's something that I really like and I can see myself rereading in the future. I get rid of things after I read them for the most part. Just because books don't see as much use as a movie or an album. So for me, it's like I'd rather just let it go, and then if I really, want to, I can just reacquire it later. So yeah, I've got all my books in this bedroom. My bedroom I'm in here, except for some oversized art books, nonfiction stuff, and graphic novels that are in my second room that I have. So yeah, let's just go through them. First, these are some things that I have off the shelf because I'm about to try to start reading one of these. New Adam Levin, New Moshfegh, and Bunny by Mona Awad. Yeah, I have read the first few pages of each of these books, but I want to actually dive into one of them. I don't know which one it's going to be. We will see. Let's just hit the first shelf here. Ugh. This lovely portrait I have here to the side that I found at a Goodwill. So we've got Boxman, Kobo Abe. So this is Kobo Abe wrote The Woman in the Dunes, which I've never read, but I love the film. And here we've got some Kathy Acker, In Memoriam to Identity, Pussy King of the Pirates, and then this one, which is 3 novels in one volume. If it can focus, maybe. There it goes. Kathy Goes to Haiti, My Death, My Life by Pier Paolo Pasolini, famous Italian filmmaker who made Salo, and Florida. So, and those, I have not read anything by Kathy Acker. I've been acquiring but never reading. This is my friend Saul's copy of Baby Fucker. I talked about that on an old video. Haven't read it yet. Here, Welfare by Steve Anwyl. This is a book. I bought some mystery books from an author who I read a book by that I quite enjoyed. Let me run over here and grab it. Hurricane Season by Kelby Losack. I did a little review about that book. Kelby Losack on Twitter was saying, excuse my laundry, Kelby Losack was saying that he wanted to get rid of books, so he was like, send me $20, I'll send you some mystery books. So I did. That was one of them. This huge fucking thing is Louis Armand, The Combinations. Not a particularly well-known book. I think I saw that Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse did a video about it, maybe. This was just a thing that came in when I was working at Half Price, and I was kind of drawn to. Big book. Here we've got Large Animals by Jess Arndt. A collection of stories. I bought this book long ago. Also at Half Price, I believe. And have not read. Paul Auster, New York Trilogy. Amazing that I've never read this. Some ballads here. I can't even remember if I finished Crash, but I read a lot of it when I was young. But I think I needed some adult eyes. John Barth, a sort of early postmodernist in the vein of a Gaddis. This was his sort of big magnum opus, Sotweed Factor. Sort of I think it's sort of a satirical Dickensian kind of thing, if I remember right. Again, I'm sorry, I've not actually read any of these books. Donald Barthelme, another great American postmodernist, 60 stories, just as it says. I've read some of these stories, but I've never read the whole thing. This is one that's cool. This is A Task by Ken Bauman. This is a dude who I found out about him on Magic the Gathering Twitter. Started seeing him, and then I found out that he was a writer and that he is like acquaintances with Dennis Cooper, that they have some sort of correspondence with each other. And then I looked into his books, and I picked that one up because if someone is a Magic player and a Dennis Cooper fan, then I'm probably gonna like whatever they have to say. This is a book that everybody knows. It's been very popular. Haven't read it yet, though. Some Samuel Beckett. Yep. Appleseed. This came out last year, and I bought it, and then I never read it. Run Off Sugar Crystal Lake. Logan, if you see this, I'm sorry. I haven't read your book yet since I met you like a year ago and bought it from you. I will get to it, I promise. Something Gross. Big Bruiser Dope Boy. Juan, my bud, Juan, over at Plagued by Visions, good friend of the channel. He read this and passed it along to me because he knew I wanted to read it. Haven't read it yet. Some Bolaño here to cap off this row. I have read a number of Bolaños, but not these ones. This one here, you can see. Oh, this was when I was working at Half Price. It was marked down in December of 2016, which would have been when I worked at the Crystal, Minnesota location. Third Reich, Savage Detectives. I got this one at Half Price too, but long ago before I worked there. And Amulet. Have not read any of those. Okay, some Blake Butler here. There Is No Year and 300 Million. I read a Blake Butler last year, whose name is escaping me at this moment, but I enjoyed it a lot. I picked those up. This one it's sinful that I have not read this book. I will one day, though. Octavia Butler. Raymond Carver. I think I've read a lot of the stories that are in this collection because I read a big fat new and collected from him, and it had the title story in it. I know. Raymond Carver, genius, one of the great short story writers of all time. This is one that I picked up, even though I don't really like fantasy that much. This pull quote here: "The century's first landmark work of fantasy, Alan Moore." That's high praise. Ted Chiang, Exhalation. Haven't read any Ted Chiang, but I hear nothing but fantastic things about him, and I really enjoyed the film Arrival that was based on one of his stories. So this is the debut novel of one of my college professors, Stephen Clark. This book came out in 2014 or something like that. I read half of it probably at the time and kind of lost interest. I'm sorry, Stefan. I hope you never see this. Yeah, here you go. 2014. One of my talented students. I'm sorry that I didn't finish your book, Stefan. He got that book plugged on Colbert. That's pretty cool. Dennis Cooper, I read half of that book and I didn't finish it. It's the first George Miles book. It's not bad, but it's just sort of, it felt kind of aimless, I guess. Here I've got the two Brunist novels by Robert Coover, and then I've also got Public Burning by Robert Coover, as well as this one, Child Again. So this was his first novel, Origin of the Brunists. Came out in the late 60s, and it's sort of like a cult, very kind of, seems almost Pynchonian plot, the way that it's been described. And then, 50 years later, he wrote this over 1,000-page sequel to it. Have not read either of those. Public Burning, of course, is about Nixon. It's his most famous book. I've had this hardcover of it since I was in high school, and I've never read it. And then I picked this up a while back at Dreamhaven, which is a sci-fi fantasy bookstore here in town, because I was like, oh, it's cool. And then it comes with like a deck of like cards, like almost tarot cards that you use while you read the book, which is really cool. Here you got Mike Correo, Rituals Performed in the Absence of Ganymede. He's a local guy, and this is on 1111, which is a local publisher. He does a lot of editing and stuff for them as well. Weird, experimental, arcane piece of text. I don't know if I would call it a novel. It is a text, which I believe, he says that up here. Hopscotch. Pretty, classic. Next is another one that I got from Kelby Losack. Nick Cutter's The Troop. This is a pretty notorious transgressive horror novel about Boy Scouts who get stranded on an island, I believe, and foul things happen. I'm excited to read that one. Here I have another book by a professor. This was my advisor in college, Cass Daglish. Did she sign this one for me? She did. Enjoy the journey with Nin and her dead women something writer friends. 2014. Yep. That was like the summer before my last year of college. I worked as an intern for the grad department. They have a low residency creative writing program that's like 2 weeks long, and I was like a gopher sound guy for speakers and coffee getter and stuff. This is the new John Darnielle of The Mountain Goats. His other two novels are astonishing and amazing, and The Mountain Goats are also fantastic. This just came out earlier this year, and I got a signed copy of it. Haven't read it yet, though, but I've heard it's quite good. This is another book that came out this year. X by Davy Davis. Weird sort of dystopian queer horror thriller book my friend Saul told me about, and I was like, yeah, that sounds sick as shit. So I bought it for myself, and I also bought a second copy and gave it to a friend for their birthday. My roommate, actually. This is actually a book I have read, White Noise by DeLillo. I read this book when I was in high school, which I think is like absolutely not the right time to read that book. Now that I'm in my 30s, I think that I'm pretty ready for White Noise, and I want to reread it before the Noah Baumbach movie comes out later this year. Hopefully I will do that. And then, of course, I have Libra, also by DeLillo. This is about Lee Harvey Oswald. I read half of Underworld by Don DeLillo when I was in high school, too. Another book that I think I was just too young to appreciate. Down here, we've got Antoine de Saint-Exupéry of, he wrote The Little Prince. This is a memoir of his, Wind, Sand, and Stars, about aviation. He was a pilot, and that's how he died. He was shot down during World War II. Virginie Despentes, pornographer, filmmaker, novelist, the first of her Vernon Subutex trilogy. I started this book and was really enjoying it, but just ran out of steam, couldn't get myself to read. Joan Didion, Year of Magical Thinking. I was listening to this on audiobook after she died, but I had to stop because I was listening to it in the car and it was making me feel so fucked up. The the part when she goes, and this is a memoir about the death of her husband, and there's a part where she goes and watches the autopsy be performed on her husband, and I couldn't deal with it. It was just too gnarly, and I had to quit listening. Here you will see I have a whole mess of Phil Dick. Simulacra, Ubik, Scanner Darkly, Valis, Martian Time Slip, Dr. Blood Money, Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said, Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldridge, Time Out of Joint, Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, and Radio Free Albemuth. So I have actually read Valis. This shouldn't be on here. That should be over there. And I have also read A Scanner Darkly, but I want to reread it. I've read a few other Phil Dick books too. I had like a very passionate moment with him when I was in college, and I bought all of these. And yeah, he's great. This is Veins by Drew, aka Drew Toothpaste, aka Drew Fairweather. If you ever read the webcomic Toothpaste for Dinner, that's this guy. He's just sort of like a notorious like internet presence. He's just done a lot of things on the internet, and I quite enjoy him. Him and his wife have a podcast called Garbage Brain University that I listened to. I found out he had written this book. It was sort of like a weird, sort of gross coming-of-age novel. It sounds right up my alley, so I picked it up. Ricky Ducournay, Traffic. I remember Leaf by Leaf talking about really enjoying this book, and then I found it. This came out like last year, and then I found it at a thrift store for $1, so had to pick that up. Actually, at the exact same time, I also picked up this copy of Name of the Rose. Never read this, but it does. I'm such a little slut for secret societies and mysteries of conspiracy and ancient orders and shit like that. I think I'll probably enjoy it. Some Harlan Ellison. This is a fun one. Did you know that Mick Foley wrote a novel? Famed wrestler and English major, has a BA in English. I've read 2 of his memoirs, and they are not ghostwritten, and they're very well written. So I've always been like, I bet that this book is interesting. Mick Foley, one of my favorite wrestlers. I actually have, sorry to just keep on running around the room. I have this signed Mr. Sacco here in a nice shadow box that my mother made. Next, we've got Eladatl, or Eladatl. I talked about this when I bought it on the channel. It's a sort of steampunk alternate history, postmodern novel thing about airships in Los Angeles, the communist, socialist airships. Here I've got some Gaddis. This is my very sad-looking copy of the Recognitions that got left. My ex-wife took this out of the back seat of our car and put it into the trunk that was not waterproofed, and then that happened to it. And I will never forgive her. I've had this since high school. I got probably a couple hundred pages into it a couple times, but never finished it. The only Gaddis I've read all the way through is JR, which I did a review on last year when I read it. This is The Tunnel by William Gass. This is another big, chunky, postmodern classic about a guy who's like obsessed with Hitler or something, and he's digging a tunnel in his yard. And apparently it's really hard to read. Here we've got William Gibson, Neuromancer, classic cyberpunk stuff. This is a thing that Kelby Losek sent me. I don't know what it is. This is a thing I got in a book exchange. I also don't really know what it is. Grady Hendrix, Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I don't know if I'm going to like this or not, but I picked it up for cheap. We will see. Here I've got some Michel Houellebecq. Here we've got Jeff Jackson, Destroy All Monsters. Does sort of transgressive postmodern fiction. This is a record about an epidemic of rock star assassinations, and it's written with an A side and a B side, like a single, like a vinyl single, which is pretty cool. Here we've got another Minneapolis, not native, but resident, Marlon James. Here's his most famous novel, Brief History of 7 Killings, about Jamaica in the 70s and the attempted assassination of Bob Marley. And then here, the first of his new sort of dark fantasy series, Black Leopard, Red Wolf. Haven't read either of these. Started Brief History, read a couple hundred pages of it. Hard to read book. This is the third book in this trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. I read the first two and didn't finish it. Here's some Dennis Johnson, who I adore. Miranda July, love her films, never read a book by her. Vegetarian, horror-ish book. Charlie Kaufman. I read half of this massive fucking thing when it came out, and then I lost steam and never finished it. Some Jack Ketchum, who I've never read anything by, but I found this and I picked it up. Out. I don't usually read mysteries, but this one sounds good. Japanese author, about a group of women covering up a murder. And yeah. And then finally, look, I do need to get up for the bottom row. We've got 5 of the 6 Nausgard books. I read the first one, but it was almost 10 years ago, so I probably need to reread it. Satan Tango by Krasna Horkai. Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. Next to that is You Will Love What You Have Killed, which was a book that was on Dennis Cooper's favorite list from last year. This was some guy I found on Twitter, Matt Lee, who's acquainted with a bunch of these like transgressive horror authors who are all buds on the internet. Picked his book up. Topeka School, Ben Lerner. It was a pretty popular book. It sounds up my alley. This is my friend Saul's book. He loaned it to me. Jonathan Letham's first novel. It's like a fantasy noir. These are Cixin Liu's second and third books from the 3 Body Problem series, which I read the first one and really enjoyed and then never read the others. It's a common theme in my life. That's why I don't like series. Priest Daddy. This is a memoir by Patricia Lockwood, who I really loved her poetry, and then she wrote a novel as well. I really loved that, and that's a memoir. And then at the very bottom here, we have the first 3 Necroscope books by Brian Lumley, which I've always wanted to read. Hey, it's a different time later, like the next day. I have time now to finish shooting this, but I also noticed that I am 2 subscribers away from 500 in my access to the community tab. Big mistake. So yeah, this is a 500 subscriber special now. Series we'll be doing. Just looking at shelves. Alright, here's the other shelf in the bedroom for reference. There's the first one over there. Alright. Up here we've got Carmen Maria Machado. Not read that. Story collection, I believe. This is Ben Marcus's most recent story collection. It's the only thing of his I haven't read. David Markson, famed postmodernist. I started this book once and it was interesting, but I couldn't really get into it. This is the most recent James McBride book. I feel like I'm never going to read this and I'll probably end up getting rid of it. Got some Cormac McCarthy. You know him. You know him well. Tom McCarthy. I've heard he's kind of a Pynchonian kind of guy. Wacky. Here's a big boy and the most expensive book I own. Women and Men by Joseph McElroy. I bought this book when it was like $15. You can see right here. It was in used acceptable condition. Now it's like $100 or something stupid like that. It's just one of those books that's really big and really hard to read, and I'll probably never read it and die with it, carry it with me for the rest of my life. Mystery.doc. This is a big fat thing that's, I heard it's kind of like House of Leaves. See, it's got weird looking, I don't know. I don't remember what it's about. I bought it last year. Didn't read it. Perdido Street Station. I don't like fantasy that much, but this one seems like it might be up my alley. More sort of dark. Stephen Millhauser, New and Selected Stories. I haven't read this, but I bought this because there's a story in this that is one of the new stories here in this new selection called The Next Thing. I read that story in a workshop in college and love it. It is one of my favorite short stories, and so I want to read the rest of them, but I haven't. It's about it's sort of like Something Wicked This Way Comes, but it's about Walmart basically coming to a town and corrupting it. Mishima, Spring Snow. This is the first of the tetralogy. Whose name I don't remember. Sea of Fertility, excuse me. Yeah, I read Sailor Who Fell from Grace of the Sea a couple years ago, and I really liked it. Here's Black Swan Green by David Mitchell. I read Cloud Atlas last year and enjoyed it quite a bit. My friend who really likes David Mitchell told me that this one was also really good, so I picked that up. This is Walter Mower's fantasy-ish thing, I think. A guy I worked with at half price really liked this book, so I bought it. This is Alan Moore's massive fucking thing, Jerusalem, another massive book that I'll probably never read. Moshfegh. These are the ones I haven't read yet, besides the new one, which I also haven't read. Yeah, She Rules. I've heard this one's not as good, and it was like an earlier book that she like didn't publish, but then like did publish later because they were like, we need you to publish something because you're so hot right now. But these ones, this one's a novella, which is her debut, and this one is a story collection, so I'm gonna check those out. Here we've got a bunch of Murakami, both Haruki and Ryu here. So these are some Murugami's that I haven't read. This is the most recent one. I read a good chunk of this. I read that much of it. It was like 100 pages, I think, when it came out, and didn't finish it. This is his first two novels when they finally got printed in America. I picked that up at the bookstore when I worked there. I think I have every book he's written, except for the... Nope, I lied, because that's what this is. I was going to say that except for the nonfiction one. This is the one about the Aum Shinryuko sarin gas attacks. It's a nonfiction book. And yeah, I haven't read... South of the Border is one I feel like that people don't talk about that much. After Dark, I started once but didn't read. Sputnik Sweetheart I haven't read. Norwegian Wood, I know it's, like one of his most popular, but the fact that it's, his most conventional has always kind of made me not be that interested. I fell deeply in love with Murakami when I was 18, 19 years old. Read a lot of his stuff, but not all of it. And Ryu Murakami, I haven't read anything by him, but I have tracked down Audition and Piercing here. Here we've got the three novels of Flannel Bryan, famed early postmodernist Irishman. The Dalkey Archive here also gave its name to the publishing house that published this version of it, as well as many others, including this David Markson book. They published all three of these editions of these Flannel Bryan books and many other. They specialize in postmodern lit. This is a thing that my ex-wife gave me for my birthday, I think. It's a volume 1 of a trilogy of novels about pro wrestling. You can see here we got a pull quote from McFoley. I think the guy who wrote this is a wrestler or something. He is currently co-writing Jim Ross's autobiography. If you're a wrestling fan, then that will mean something to you. I I haven't even tried this. I have this like distinct feeling that it's going to be terrible, but yeah. Here's Memory Police. This book sounds sick as fuck. I've been wanting to read it for forever, and I finally saw a copy of it in the wild and pulled the trigger on it not that long ago. This is a book called The Dictionary of the Khazars by, I think he's like a Polish guy, so it's Pavich, I would imagine, is the last name. As you can see here, this is the female edition. I believe this book is sort of like a kind of like novel-sized kind of Borgesian experiment where it reminded me of Talon Ukbar and Orbis Tertius, which is one of my favorite Borges stories about the encyclopedia of a country that doesn't exist. I don't think that's exactly what this is, but it's sort of like a history of a country that doesn't exist, and there's like weird sort of like metatextual things happening with like color and stuff. And then the book, there's a male and a female version, and there's like the only difference is like apparently like one line is changed or something. I don't know. It sounds interesting. It jumped out at me off of the shelf when I worked at the bookstore and I bought it. Bell Jar. I know I haven't. We don't need to talk about the fact that I haven't read that. Some Pinch On. Lot 49. I cannot tell you how many times I've started this book being like, it's short. I can just burn through it. Gravity's Rainbow. I've made a couple of pretty valiant efforts on Gravity's Rainbow. I've gotten about halfway through that guy at once, and maybe 100 pages a couple times. V, haven't read either. I have read Vinland, and I have read Inherent Vice, and I read a good chunk of Mason and Dixon. At some point I got rid of Mason and Dixon and Against the Day because I was just like, I feel like I'm never gonna fucking read these books. But I did read JR last year, so I guess you never know. This is a book that 1111 put out. Weird text art horror poetry book. I don't even know what to call it. Another 1111 one here. Drifter. Stories from David Leo Rice. Pull quote on the back from Jaeger. Sick. A pair of Philip Roths. I've read a couple Philip Roths in my life. I read The Ghost Rider, which is the first one with the guy from this. What's his name? I don't remember. But he's in it. It's his Nathan something. Anyways, I read that. I read Everyman, I think, which is one of his last ones. Yeah, I used to have a bunch of Philip Roth books, like, because there's so many of them. And then at some point, I just got rid of most of them because I was like, I'm not going to read these anytime soon. I've been carrying this fucking thing around for forever, and at this point, I probably need to reread the first one because it's been so long, waiting for the third one. But then also, I feel like I don't even care anymore, and I should just get rid of that. God of Small Things. This is a book that my friend Kristen really likes a lot, so I picked it up, and we were talking about books. This is Rudy Rucker's Where tetralogy, collected in one volume. I started this when I bought it and read a chunk of the first one, and I was enjoying it, but it was at a period when I was like not reading a lot, and so just kind of like lost it. Another Kristen recommendation, Sparrow. This one sounds really interesting. It's about like Jehovah's Witnesses? Jesuits, I'm sorry. Jesuit colonists in space on like a space ark, which sounds interesting. Let me take a seat here. I've got the only two George Saunders books I haven't read. The two most recent ones. Lincoln and the Bardo I started when it came out and didn't finish. And then this one is his essays about Russian short stories that was adapted from his like legendary grad workshop at Syracuse. This one, Amanda Schofield, Bina. I saw someone on Book Talk or something talking about this book. I don't remember who, but it sounded really interesting, but I don't remember why. And then I put it on my list, and then I found it, and then I bought it, and that's all I know. Here we've got a couple of Sabolds, Austerlitz and Rings of Saturn. I read a good chunk of Austerlitz one time. It is beautifully written and haunting, but not fun. Not a fun book to read. So I haven't read that. Hyperion, I know. I should have read this a long time ago, and I didn't, and I'm sorry. This is another book, I can't even remember where I heard about this. This is a Daughtry. Yeah, it's a Daughtry too. I think I read this book is supposed to be really fucking weird and experimental and interesting, which makes sense because Daughtry put it out. Neal Stephenson. I really liked Neal Stephenson when I was in high school, and this book came out just a couple months after I graduated, and I have no particular interest in reading it, but as you can see here, I went to his reading when it came out and got it signed, so I feel like I have to carry this massive book around with me for the rest of my life. I did also get him to sign my copy of Snow Crash, which is down here with the stuff that I've read already. Okay, Cows, Matthew Stokoe. Someday we'll read it. It'll happen. Some Strugatsky brothers. Stalker and Hard to Be a God. Yep. Classic Russian sci-fi. This thing, I don't remember anything about it. I got it from Kelby Losak. Here we've got a big string of Jeff Vandermeer books. I read more than half of Bourne when it came out and then didn't finish it. Dead Astronauts is a, not sequel, but set in the same universe. Cities, these three, I think, all are also set in the same universe. Those were older from before Southern Reach, and then Bourne and Dead Astronauts were after. Here we got a run of Vonnegut. I have read Breakfast of Champions, and I have read Sirens of Titan. However, I read both of them when I was in high school and don't remember them super well. I'm sure the hardcore We Damage We heads may remember me committing to reading every book by Kurt Vonnegut, and then that did not, in fact, happen whatsoever. But I went out and bought a bunch of his books with the intention of doing that, and then didn't. I did reread Slaughterhouse 5 last year, which I really had a good time rereading. Dave Wallace. I have read Girl with a Curious Hair when I was younger. It's a story collection, but I want to reread it. And then these two, never finished either of them. Even though I do love Infinite Jest, as is known, have not finished either of his other novels. Down here, this is another dude that I met in college because he came to the grad program to workshop with us and do a reading. And yeah, Steve Wingate. I remember liking him, and I liked his stories, so I bought his book, but I never read it. Yep, Gene Wolfe. This is the first two of the four of the books of the New Sun. Here we got some David Wong. This is a sequel to John Dies at the End. I need to reread John Dies at the End because it's been so long since I read it. And there's a third one for this series, and the fourth one is actually coming out now, which is wild to me. And then this is the first in his other series, which he's doing now too. I was a big fan of David Wong when I was a teenager. Little Life, every once in a while I like to read a big NPR book like this. like Jonathan Franzen book or something like that. It's like, it's kind of like a meat and potatoes book, but still like it. Here's Miss Marguerite Young with Miss McIntosh, My Darling. I've known about this book for forever because part of it is set in Whatcheer, Iowa, where my grandfather lived. And I've always felt like maybe I'm supposed to read this book. It's, one of the longest and most complicated books ever written in the English language. Interior Chinatown. This is a popular book. It won the National Book Award. And then some Roger Zelazny. This is a story collection that's like a late career one. I've never read any of his stuff, and I found that book for really cheap, so I picked it up. Then I've got this, which is like a compilation of all of these authors, some of whom have been mentioned here or on the channel before. Mike Rayo, B.R. Yeager, A.S. Coomer. I've not read anything by, but know him. Vincent James Perrone. He also publishes, this is an 1111 book, and he published a book of poetry with them, which we haven't gotten to it yet. David Leo Rice, Gary J. Shipley, and Andrew Wilt, who runs 1111, the contributor here. The rest of the shelf is my poetry stuff. First I have Amiri Baraka reader. So this isn't just poetry, it's got plays in it and essays and stuff too. Amiri Baraka, what a guy. I love his poetry. He was the poet laureate of New Jersey, and then after 9/11, he made this poem that incurred a bunch of controversy called Who Blew Up America, and they tried to depose him as the poet laureate, but figured out that there wasn't any way to do it, and he refused to resign, and so they they got rid of there being a poet laureate of New Jersey, and there still isn't one, just so that they could not let Amiri Baraka be it. This is all of Bolaño's poetry. It's a thick book, but it's because it's dual language, which is really cool. Since I, very rudimentarily speak Spanish, it's really cool to have the text side by side to see. They do that a lot with poetry. I found a lot. I used to have a Neruda that was like that too, that I don't have anymore, I don't think. But yeah, Bolaño always thought of himself as a poet first, and he didn't start writing fiction until later when he had children, because he wanted to make money, because as is all of us know, there is no money in poetry. This is Cass, again, my advisor in college. This is a book of poetry she wrote. Matthew Dickman, Mayakovsky's Revolver. My college professor, Carrie Waterman, who's a poet, recommended this to me and a couple others in here. Based on what you write, I think you would like this. Matthew and Michael Dickman are twin brothers who are both poets, and they both write very sad poetry about wanting to commit suicide. For those who don't know, Mayakovsky was a Russian poet who shot himself, so that's the titular Mayakovsky's Revolver. This is All You Ask For Is Longing by Sean Thomas Daughtry, new and selected poetry. Sean is a guy who lives in Erie, Pennsylvania, but he came to Augsburg, my college, as a visiting writer and workshopped and did a one-on-one workshop with me, read a dozen of my poems and sat down and talked to me about them for an hour and a half, and then we went and got drinks and stuff. Really cool guy. Just literally he works in a fucking pool hall and just shoots pool and writes poetry all day. Literally lives the dream life. What a cool guy. This one isn't someone that I know. This is Bow Down by Karen Green, who is David Foster Wallace's widow, and this was the book that she wrote about his death. And it's poetry and like mixed media art together, all in sort of response to his passing. There is some really hauntingly awful stuff in here, hard things, there's one that I just remember so vividly that's about like finding him hanging and like trying to get him down and then like worrying about like breaking his legs when he falls and like all this stuff. And it's like, God, it's just brutal. These are both Alex Lemon here. And Alex Lemon was a guy who came and worked at the graduate program at Augsburg, so I met him and workshopped with him through that. But he is originally from Minnesota, went to Macalester College, and he also wrote a memoir that I don't remember the name of right now. It was like his nickname, so it's like a one-word title, but it's about how he had like a brain tumor when he was young and like lost his eyeball and like a bunch of other stuff, and he played baseball before that. It was really good. It was a really good memoir, and he's a really cool guy. I really hit it off well with him. This is Patricia Lockwood's Motherland, Fatherland, Homeland, Sexuals. This was a book that just like I bought at Barnes & Noble because like it jumped out at me on the shelf, and then I picked it up and started reading it and just like fell in love with it. Patricia Lockwood is like a woman who got kind of famous off of Twitter for being part of like the weird Twitter movement, if that's a thing. It's not a thing, but this book is really, really good, and some of the best poetry that I've read of modern times, I think, Patricia Lockwood. And her novel was fantastic too, that came out last year. I really enjoyed that. Here we've got some Ron Padgett. Ron Padgett's a famous, if you read modern poetry, he's a pretty famous guy. Old dude. This one's published by Coffee House, who are here in Minneapolis. I went and saw him read at the Central Library when I was in college, and got it signed by him. This is Starving Romantic by the aforementioned Vincent James Perrone. This is an 11/11 book. I met him briefly at that reading. He was there. Haven't read it yet, but yeah. Here is Ariel. I feel like I'm missing some books because like I had the Ariel manuscript version. That's like the one that hasn't been like touched by what's his face. And I also definitely had her first collection, whose name I'm blanking on right now. But yeah, Plath, one of my favorite poets. Very much like tried to harness her spirit when I was in college and working on poetry. I felt very tied to the confessional poets. I mean, you can see here. I'll get there. This is my favorite volume of poetry, though. And he's a Minnesota guy, Matt Rasmussen, who is just around, he lives here and writes, but this was a big book. You can see here it was a shortlisted for the NBA, which is huge. But he came and workshopped at Augsburg, and that's how I met him and fell in love with this book. I didn't have the money to buy it at the time. I borrowed it from the library when I had to read it for class, and then later I was able to go track him down into reading and buy it. Long inscription in there from Matt. This is a book about his brother's suicide, and it is really haunting. There's one in here called Reverse Suicide that is maybe my favorite poem. It's just a very evocative poem. Here we got two by Paisley Rectal, who was another visiting writer that I met when I was in college. Yep. She did I remember she did a reading in the Augsburg bookstore, which was very small. And I remember going to that and getting those signed. Here we've got Collected and Sexton, who I also love. Juan sent me this one again. What a guy. Check out Plagued by Visions. But yeah, he posted some books and he was like, I'm getting rid of these. Anybody want them? And I was like, yeah, give me that Anne Sexton. I've always meant to own this Collected Anne Sexton and just kept putting it off and grabbing something else instead, you know. So I'm happy to have it finally. Katrina Vandenberg, another Minnesota poet. She teaches at Hamlin, which is like a rival school to my college. But she's friends with all of them and stuff. You know, they're all locals. They all know each other. She judged the poetry contest that Augsburg did one year and gave me runner-up, which was very kind of her to do. And yeah. And then the last three things I have on here are by one of my professors from college. This is Carrie Waterman. These are three collections of poetry by her. This one's from the 70s, 90s, 2000s, I believe. And so this one is interesting because this is from this Pitt Poetry series. This book's a little valuable, actually. Yeah, so she wasn't my advisor, technically, but she was a lot. We had that role in my life a lot. Down here is just stuff that I've read already. Hurricane Season, Three Body Problem, Serotonin. This is a lot of stuff that I've talked about on the show before. Got some Murakami, just collected Borges fiction, 2666. John Gardner's Art of Fiction. If you want to write fiction, I cannot stress enough how good a book that is for you. Wife in My Van, more Borges, Bubblegum, more Levin. There's my John Dies at the End. Blood Meridian, Cyrus 5, Moshfegh. A lot of these books I've talked about on the channel. Oh, here's a cool one, though. Let me pull this one out. This is the only one I'm going to pull out and show off. If I can. So this, I used to have just a regular hardcover, but then this arc came in when I worked at Half Price. This is Universal Harvester by John Darnielle. Now, the printed copy of this book is beautiful, too. But this is a book about a guy who works at a video store, and people are finding weird things taped over the videos in the video store. And the book looks like a tape in a video store. It's in a plastic case. And then when you crack open the plastic case, it's got a little mass market sized paperback of it. It says it's an ARC. Now, they never published this style of this book in a commercial way. The hardcover and paperback that were released for commercial purchasing were just regular books. But this advanced reader copy has this cool fucking packaging. So I just got rid of mine and kept this because this is so fucking cool. And I love this book. All right. And we have one final shelf. Just a little sneak preview of what's going on in here. But this will go quickly. This is just my graphic novels, manga, and oversized and art books and stuff. So here we've got all of Preacher, the first 6 volumes of Saga, and the first volumes of Monstrous and Sex Criminals. Here's the first of the deluxe hardcovers of Berserk, first 2 volumes of Poon Poon. Black Hole by Charles Burns. This is a really cool graphic novel that not enough people know about. Very evocative art. pen art in there. The door just closed. Is there a... Oh, I see why. There's a cat battling a spider. Well, come kill it. Useless. Useless. There's some Junji Ito. This is the manga of The Lighthouse that he did that was released in Japan. My buddy Saul got that for me for my birthday. This is his cat diary and all of Uzumaki. Here we've got some of Why the Last Man. I thought I had all of it, but apparently I don't. This is just a random Joe Bob Briggs book. I've got all my John Porcelinos here. I used to have the King Cat Classics big hardcover. I think I loaned it to someone at some point, and it never came back to me. Susceptible. Genevieve Castré. This was Phil Elverum's wife who died a number of years ago. Are you destroying the carpet? It's my roommate's cat, Monty. This is my pop-up copy of The Little Prince. I love The Little Prince. And I love having this big, funky pop-up version. It's really cute and fun. The 2 Twin Peaks books that came out before and after season 3. I do also have the Laura Palmer diary and the Dale Cooper diary as well. This is just a bunch of Basquiat, Henry Darger. And here is, let me sit down. I'm squatting and my legs are killing me. This is an Alex Soth book. And his books are always super limited edition and valuable. And so my mom, when she bought this for me, custom cut this acid-proof box for it to live in so that it will stay nice forever. Alex Soth is a photographer, one of my favorite artists. This book, songbook, it's all black and white photos. My pipe dream when I get my book published is I want one of his photos from Sleeping by the Mississippi to be the cover. Here's a weird Taschen book I picked up when I was at half price. I might not actually even want to open this because there are a lot of dead people inside of this book. This is a bunch of old car crash photos from the 50s and 60s. And then I've got this interesting one, Bye Kitten. This is, it says here, contemporary Japanese art between heaven and hell. There's a lot of interesting stuff in this, but the big thing that this one gave me was it put a name and more art to Makoto Ida right here. So right here, this is Harakiri Schoolgirl by Makoto Ida. Now, this upper corner here, a crop of that is the cover of the album Quarantine by Laurel Halo. And so I was familiar with that, but I didn't know the origin of the art. I'd never seen any of the other stuff he's done. And I guess it's not in here, but I really love his painting Giant Member Fuji versus King Ghidorah, which is a sort of homage to the Dream of the Fisherman's Wife. But it's the Giant Member Fuji from Ultraman, who's being fucked to death and eaten alive by King Ghidorah. And here's this on vinyl. Yeah. So yeah, that's all the books. I've got a lot of records, as you can see. I've also got all of these DVDs, and there's video games there. There's more video games on that bookshelf, and then the VHS tapes over here as well. A lot of stuff to look at. I don't know what all I'll do. I might not do records just because there's so many of them. But yeah, maybe leave a comment. Say what you're interested in seeing from the collection. But for now, 500 subscribers. Very exciting. Thank you all so much. And yeah, stay tuned for more. Bye.